The Amazon rainforest burned with unprecedented fury, trapping countless creatures in a deadly blaze. Flames spread rapidly through dense forest, leaving animals with no time or space to escape. Volunteers and firefighters raced against time to rescue wildlife from the advancing inferno. This video uncovers the tragic impact of fires on countless species and their fragile ecosystems. You will witness stories of survival and the heroic efforts to save endangered animals from disaster. Smoke and heat devastated habitats, forcing creatures into unfamiliar areas in search of safety. Experts warned that climate change and human activity significantly worsened the scale of the fires. Communities nearby faced destruction and struggled to protect both humans and wildlife from harm. Stay tuned to understand the causes, consequences, and ongoing efforts to restore the rainforest. Make sure to like this video and subscribe for more true stories revealing nature's intense struggles. 1. Fire erupts in Amazon. The Amazon rainforest erupted in flames, consuming trees and plants at an alarming speed. Wildlife had little warning as smoke filled the air and flames moved across dry forest floors. Animals fled desperately, but many were trapped in dense areas with no safe escape route. Birds struggled to fly through thick smoke, disoriented and coughing as air quality worsened. Mammals like jaguars, tapirs, and monkeys tried to escape but found paths blocked by fire. Reptiles hid in crevices but were often overcome by heat and smoke before reaching safety. Insects and small rodents perished in the underbrush, unable to flee the rapidly spreading flames. Aquatic animals suffered as water sources evaporated or were contaminated by ash and debris. Firefighters and local authorities struggled to contain the blaze due to its vast and remote area. Communities nearby feared for their safety and the devastating loss of biodiversity around them. The suddenness of the fire highlighted climate change and human activity as contributing factors. Animals relied on instinct, but survival rates dropped sharply due to the fire's intensity. Some species became trapped in tree canopies, unable to descend safely through the burning forest. Ash and embers fell like rain, spreading fire further and creating new danger zones rapidly. Predators and prey alike were forced into unusual behavior to survive the extreme conditions. Volunteers attempted rescue operations, but the scale of the disaster made efforts limited. The Amazon Inferno underscored how vulnerable ecosystems are to uncontrolled wildfires. Immediate action was critical to prevent further loss of unique species in the rainforest. Smoke and fire destroyed critical habitats, affecting food chains and reproductive cycles. The blaze became a global concern, highlighting the urgent need for rainforest protection. 2. Birds in peril. Birds struggled to navigate the smoke-filled sky as fire engulfed the canopy and forest edges. Many became disoriented and exhausted while fleeing rapidly moving flames threatening their nests. Species like toucans and parrots faced high mortality as trees collapsed under intense heat. Young birds in nests perished instantly while adults attempted to carry fledglings to safety. Loss of food sources from burnt fruits and seeds forced surviving birds to seek distant areas. Injured birds suffered burns to wings and talons, reducing their ability to forage or fly. Water contamination made drinking and cooling down difficult for birds escaping the inferno. Migratory birds trapped in the region were unable to continue their seasonal journeys safely. Smoke inhalation caused respiratory distress and death among smaller and weaker bird species. Birdsong ceased in affected areas as surviving birds hid silently from fire and predators. Rescue efforts prioritized species at risk, but access was limited due to the fire's reach. Birds that survived faced competition for scarce food and nesting sites in safe zones. Scientists documented population declines that could impact pollination and seed dispersal. Burnt habitats meant many birds had no safe place to roost or rear their offspring. Volunteers attempted to provide food and shelter for injured birds after containment. Species diversity decreased drastically in fire-hit areas, altering ecosystem balance. The inferno emphasized the need for urgent protection measures for forest-dwelling birds. Avian species were critical indicators of environmental health affected by the Amazon fire. Post-fire recovery required monitoring to ensure survival and re-establishment of bird populations. The plight of birds highlighted the broader impact of the Amazon inferno on wildlife survival. 3. Mammals on the run. Jaguars, tapirs, and monkeys fled through smoky forest paths as fire consumed their habitats. Many were trapped in narrow forest corridors, unable to escape due to the rapid flame spread. Young mammals were separated from parents, leaving them vulnerable to predation and starvation. Monkeys leapt between burning trees, risking burns to reach safer canopy areas. Tapirs moved cautiously through rivers and mud, attempting to avoid fire while searching for food. Jaguars hunted frantically for prey disrupted by the inferno, competing for scarce resources. Smoke inhalation caused respiratory distress in small and large mammals alike. Some mammals succumbed to heat exhaustion before reaching safe areas far from the fire. Rodents and small carnivores faced immediate mortality in ground fires, destroying their burrows. Predators' usual hunting patterns were disrupted, leading to starvation or conflict among survivors. Mammals relied on instinct, fleeing fire zones, but survival rates were alarmingly low. Veterinarians and wildlife rescuers attempted to treat burned and injured mammals in affected zones. Survivors faced food scarcity as the fire destroyed vegetation and prey populations extensively. Mammals that escaped to rivers often faced challenges from debris and contaminated water sources. Fires caused fragmentation of habitats, isolating populations and hindering reproduction. Long-term monitoring was necessary to track population recovery after the inferno subsided. The Amazon inferno highlighted how mammals are highly vulnerable to rapid, uncontrolled fires. Rescue operations prioritized large and endangered mammals to prevent local extinctions. Public awareness campaigns highlighted mammal suffering and the urgent need for conservation. Survivors' adaptation would determine future population viability in fire-affected Amazon regions. 4. Reptile struggle. Snakes, lizards, and turtles were trapped as ground fires swept across forest floors rapidly. Many reptiles hid in soil or under rocks but succumbed to heat and smoke before escaping. Aquatic reptiles struggled as rivers and ponds were polluted with ash and debris. Territorial snakes faced crowding as safe zones diminished due to extensive fire spread. Lizards lost camouflage opportunities as burnt land exposed them to predators and sunlight. Turtles attempted to flee into rivers but faced obstacles from fallen trees and scorching banks. Eggs buried in soil were destroyed, severely affecting future reproductive cycles. Smoke caused respiratory distress, particularly for species adapted to humid forest conditions. Reptile survival depended on access to water bodies and unburnt refuges that were scarce. Rapid habitat loss forced reptiles to seek shelter in unfamiliar and dangerous areas. Conservationists worked to relocate critical species to protected reserves away from fires. Monitoring of reptile populations post-fire showed significant declines in many regions. Survivors faced competition for food and shelter in limited safe spaces across the Amazon. Reptiles that survived the inferno exhibited stress behaviors impacting reproduction and growth. The fire disrupted entire micro-ecosystems critical to reptile survival and food availability. Some species adapted by retreating deeper into soil and aquatic habitats temporarily. Reptiles became indicators of habitat destruction severity after the Amazon inferno event. Rescue efforts highlighted the difficulty of protecting ground-dwelling and slow-moving species. Long-term recovery of reptile populations depended on habitat restoration and fire prevention. The inferno emphasized the vulnerability of all reptilian life to rapid, uncontrolled fires. 5. Amphibian crisis. Frogs, toads, and salamanders suffered greatly as fires dried up their breeding ponds and streams. Many amphibians were trapped on land with no access to moisture or cool shelter from flames. Eggs and tadpoles were destroyed, leading to significant losses in the next generation population. Smoke inhalation and heat exposure caused high mortality among smaller amphibian species. Amphibians dependent on humidity struggled to maintain hydration during the inferno. Predators' behavior changed, increasing predation on stressed amphibians seeking food and refuge. Wetlands and swampy areas were affected, leaving amphibians with fewer safe zones for survival. Some amphibians attempted temporary migration but were limited by fire barriers and obstacles. Volunteers and biologists rescued stranded amphibians from drying or burning microhabitats. Populations in fire-hit areas declined drastically, threatening local ecological balance. Post-fire surveys documented surviving amphibians concentrated in remaining moist refuges. Habitat loss affected breeding, feeding, and protection against predators for amphibian species. Amphibians are critical for insect population control, showing ecosystem consequences of fire. Conservationists highlighted the need for rapid intervention to preserve remaining amphibians. Long-term monitoring ensured that surviving populations could recover and reproduce effectively. Recovery efforts included restoring wetlands and controlling invasive species in post-fire areas. The inferno revealed amphibians' vulnerability to environmental changes and habitat destruction. Public awareness campaigns emphasized amphibian losses as part of broader Amazon fire impacts. Amphibians' plight reflected the cascading effects of fire on smaller, less mobile species. Preserving aquatic and moist microhabitats became a priority to prevent further losses post-fire. 6. Insect apocalypse. Insects perished by the millions as the Inferno consumed the forest canopy and undergrowth rapidly. Bees, butterflies, ants, and beetles lost nesting sites and food sources essential for survival. Pollination cycles were disrupted, impacting flowering plants and subsequent food availability. Larvae and pupae buried in soil were destroyed by intense heat and ash covering the forest floor. Aquatic insects drowned or suffocated in rivers and ponds polluted by debris and fire runoff. Predator insects faced starvation due to loss of prey and habitats from the Inferno. Loss of insects created ripple effects across food chains affecting birds, reptiles, and amphibians. Flying insects faced smoke exposure and navigational difficulties, leading to mass mortality. Pollinator species critical to forest regeneration were severely affected, threatening plant life. Rescue efforts included relocating hives and providing temporary habitats for remaining species. Insect population monitoring revealed dramatic declines, highlighting ecosystem vulnerability. Insect losses reduced nutrient cycling in the soil and affected decomposition rates post-fire. Restoration projects aimed to reintroduce native plants to support surviving insect populations. Insect extinction risk in fire-hit areas was compounded by habitat fragmentation and climate change. Surviving insects were critical for re-establishing ecological balance and forest recovery efforts. Public education highlighted insect importance in maintaining Amazon biodiversity and stability. Insect mortality also impacted species dependent on them for pollination and food sources. Recovery plans included creating safe corridors and refuges for vulnerable insect species. Scientists emphasized that insect survival was a key indicator of post-fire ecosystem health. The Inferno underscored the fragility of insect populations in the face of uncontrolled fires. 7. River wildlife at risk. Rivers and streams became contaminated with ash and debris, threatening aquatic animals' lives. Fish struggled in oxygen-depleted water with high levels of smoke particles and pollutants. Turtles and aquatic mammals faced drowning hazards due to debris and reduced safe areas. Amphibians and reptiles lost access to clean water for hydration and reproduction during fire. Migratory fish were blocked from reaching spawning grounds by altered river pathways and heat. Birds relying on river fish for food experienced scarcity, impacting their nutrition and survival. Water quality deterioration increased the spread of diseases among aquatic species post-Inferno. Volunteers attempted to rescue trapped animals and restore water flow in smaller streams. Riverbank vegetation burned, removing shade and shelter critical for species survival along banks. Recovery depended on cleaning water bodies and restoring natural river habitats over time. Contaminated rivers affected not only wildlife but also local communities depending on water. Species diversity declined sharply and fire hit aquatic habitats, showing cascading ecological impacts. Fish mortality altered predator-prey dynamics and affected reproduction cycles in rivers. Turtles and amphibians were forced into higher risk areas with less protection from predators. Monitoring post-Inferno included water testing and wildlife population assessment in affected rivers. Restoration efforts emphasized replanting riverbank trees to stabilize ecosystems and provide shelter. Community involvement in river cleanups became crucial to accelerate wildlife recovery processes. Long-term survival of river species relied on habitat protection and pollution mitigation strategies. The Inferno demonstrated how fire can indirectly devastate aquatic ecosystems in rainforest regions. Preserving rivers and streams became central to maintaining Amazon wildlife biodiversity after fire. 8. Predator disruption. Jaguars, ocelots, and large birds of prey faced major challenges due to prey scarcity after fires. Predators struggled as prey populations were decimated by fire and habitat destruction. Hunting territories were altered, causing increased competition and aggressive behavior among species. Displaced predators entered human-populated areas seeking food, creating new conflicts and dangers. Carnivores were forced to adapt to unfamiliar landscapes with limited cover and hunting opportunities. Juvenile predators faced starvation and vulnerability to injury due to loss of maternal protection. Predator-prey balance was disturbed, affecting reproduction rates and long-term population stability. Rescue teams monitored displaced predators and attempted relocation where possible to safer areas. Fire-induced stress led to changes in predator behavior, sometimes increasing attacks on livestock. Disrupted hunting patterns caused predators to expend more energy searching for food and water. Predator displacement also affected ecosystem balance, influencing scavenger and smaller carnivore survival. Local communities reported predator sightings in unexpected areas, highlighting wildlife displacement. Conservationists emphasized predator protection to prevent cascading negative effects on biodiversity. Post-fire surveys tracked recovery of predator populations and prey availability over time. Scientific studies revealed fire impact on apex predators' territory, hunting, and survival strategies. Predators that survived the Inferno played a key role in re-establishing ecological equilibrium in the forest. Ongoing monitoring ensured that predator populations did not decline to critical endangerment levels. Adaptive management strategies aimed to balance predator needs with ecosystem and human safety. Restoring prey species and habitats was essential for long-term predator recovery post-Inferno. The Inferno highlighted the interconnectedness of predators and overall rainforest ecosystem health. 9. Microhabitats destroyed. Small microhabitats like termite mounds, hollow logs, and leaf litter were incinerated in the fire. Species dependent on microhabitats lost shelter and breeding grounds critical for survival. Amphibians, insects, and small reptiles were most affected due to limited mobility and options. Microhabitat destruction led to immediate population declines among specialized species. Replanting and habitat restoration were needed to recreate lost microhabitats over time. Volunteers attempted to provide temporary shelters for displaced small animals and insects. Fire eliminated food sources in microhabitats, compounding survival challenges for dependent species. Predators relying on microhabitat-dwelling prey faced scarcity and altered hunting behavior. Soil degradation and ash deposits hindered regrowth and microhabitat formation for months. Monitoring microhabitats helped researchers understand small species' recovery potential. Some species adapted by seeking alternative shelters, but mortality remained high. Microhabitat restoration was critical for ensuring ecological niches and biodiversity recovery. Without these structures, reproductive success and juvenile survival were severely limited. 10. Rescue operations. Rescue teams worked tirelessly to save animals trapped in burning or burnt areas of the Amazon. Efforts focused on mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and aquatic species at highest risk. Firefighters coordinated with wildlife experts to access remote or heavily damaged forest regions. Volunteers provided food, water, and temporary shelter to displaced and injured animals. Transportation of rescued animals to rehabilitation centers was crucial for recovery and care. Veterinarians treated burns, smoke inhalation, dehydration, and injuries caused by falling debris. Wildlife corridors and safe zones were identified for relocating species to reduce repeat exposure. Community involvement helped report animals in danger and support emergency rescue measures. Rescue operations were limited by ongoing fire, smoke, and hazardous terrain conditions. Monitoring post-rescue ensured that animals acclimated safely to rehabilitation and release programs. Prioritization included endangered and highly vulnerable species to prevent local extinction. Data collected during rescue informed future fire response and wildlife protection strategies. Efforts were coordinated with international organizations for expertise and logistical support. Rescue teams faced emotional challenges due to the scale of mortality witnessed in the Inferno. Post-rescue rehabilitation focused on restoring physical health, nutrition, and natural behaviors. 11. Habitat fragmentation. The Amazon Inferno left vast areas of forest destroyed, fragmenting wildlife habitats permanently. Animals were forced into isolated pockets, reducing movement and access to food and water sources. Fragmented habitats caused population bottlenecks and increased vulnerability to predation. Migratory species could not follow their normal paths due to burnt and blocked forest corridors. Connectivity loss hindered breeding opportunities and reduced genetic diversity for surviving species. Smaller species were trapped with no escape, leading to high mortality rates during and after fire. Predators and prey were separated unnaturally, altering food chains and ecosystem balance severely. Rescue and relocation efforts attempted to reconnect isolated populations wherever possible. 12. Smoke and air quality. Thick smoke from the Amazon Inferno caused respiratory distress for animals in affected regions. Mammals, birds, and reptiles struggled to breathe as particulate matter filled the forest canopy. Smoke inhalation led to coughing, eye irritation, and long-term lung damage in surviving species. Smaller animals succumbed quickly to poor air quality, unable to escape smoky zones effectively. Aquatic species were affected indirectly as ash settled in rivers and streams, contaminating water. Migratory birds experience disorientation and exhaustion due to prolonged exposure to smoke. Firefighters and volunteers face challenges protecting animals while also navigating hazardous smoke. Respiratory issues persisted for weeks in survivors, requiring medical intervention or rehabilitation. Smoke contributed to heat stress, worsening dehydration and exhaustion in affected wildlife. Scientists monitored animal behavior to assess the long-term health impacts of smoke exposure. Volunteers provided temporary shelters with clean air for animals rescued from smoke-filled areas. Airborne toxins affected predator hunting efficiency, altering behavior and survival strategies. Species with sensitive respiratory systems experienced higher mortality rates during the Inferno. Post-fire research focused on understanding chronic health effects of smoke on rainforest species. 13. Food scarcity. The Amazon Inferno destroyed vast areas of vegetation, leaving surviving wildlife without food. Herbivores struggled to find leaves, fruits, and seeds among charred forest areas after the fire. Carnivores faced prey scarcity as herbivore populations collapsed in burnt zones rapidly. Insects and smaller animals, primary food sources for many species, perished in flames. Aquatic species experienced reduced food availability due to contaminated and depleted rivers. Birds lost fruits, nectar, and insects needed for sustenance, threatening survival and migration. Food scarcity forced animals to expand foraging ranges, exposing them to further dangers. Competition increased dramatically as species concentrated in remaining resource-rich patches. Juvenile animals suffered disproportionately, struggling to compete for limited food supplies. Volunteers provided supplemental food for displaced and injured wildlife in accessible zones. Loss of critical food sources delayed reproductive cycles for mammals, birds, and amphibians. Predator-prey dynamics were disrupted as scarcity altered hunting success and survival rates. Fires caused long-term ecosystem changes that would affect food availability for years. Restoration included planting native vegetation and reintroducing essential species to restore balance. Herbivore health directly impacted carnivores dependent on them, creating cascading effects. 14. Nesting and reproduction. The Amazon Inferno destroyed nesting sites for birds, reptiles, and small mammals extensively. Loss of trees, shrubs, and ground cover left many species unable to reproduce in affected areas. Eggs and young in nests perished instantly when flames consumed forested habitats. Mating territories were disrupted as surviving animals fled to unburnt zones hastily. Survivors faced competition for safe nesting areas, reducing reproductive success rates. Aquatic species experienced loss of breeding pools due to fire and ash contamination. Species with specialized nesting habits struggled to adapt, risking population decline. Volunteers and biologists assisted in providing artificial nests and safe breeding structures. Fires caused long-term delays in breeding cycles for many rainforest species and amphibians. Juvenile survival was further impacted by overcrowding and remaining safe habitats post-Inferno. Birds returning to traditional nesting sites found destroyed trees and burnt canopy layers. Mammals like monkeys and rodents lost dens and tree hollows used for rearing young. Reptiles and amphibians lost moisture-dependent nesting sites necessary for reproduction. Re-establishing safe nesting habitats became a top priority for post-fire recovery projects. Species with flexible nesting strategies fared slightly better but faced increased predation risk. 15. Long-term ecosystem damage. The Amazon Inferno caused long-term damage to soil, water, and vegetation in fire-affected zones. Loss of trees and plants disrupted carbon storage and accelerated climate-related effects locally. Soil became nutrient depleted due to intense heat, ash, and loss of organic material from the forest. Erosion increased in fire-scarred areas, washing away remaining topsoil and affecting water quality. Aquatic ecosystems suffered from sediment and ash deposition in rivers and streams extensively. Recovery of forest layers was slow, leaving wildlife vulnerable to predators and harsh conditions. Fragmented and burnt landscapes reduced safe habitats for survival and migration of species. Loss of plant diversity affected food availability, pollination, and seed dispersal across the forest. Microclimates were altered, reducing humidity and increasing stress for moisture-dependent species. Invasive species capitalized on disturbed areas, complicating natural regeneration and habitat recovery. Fires affected both flora and fauna simultaneously, creating cascading impacts across ecosystems. Restoration required coordinated efforts to replant trees and restore natural vegetation gradually. long-term monitoring ensured recovery efforts targeted the most critical ecological zones. Species richness and ecosystem resilience were compromised due to widespread habitat destruction. Climate change amplified fire risk, making future protection and restoration increasingly urgent. 16. Rescue and rehabilitation. Wildlife rescue teams worked day and night to save animals trapped by the Amazon Inferno. Efforts included capturing injured mammals, birds, reptiles, and amphibians for medical care. Volunteers transported animals to rehabilitation centers equipped for burns and smoke inhalation. Temporary shelters and water stations provided safe spaces for rescued animals to recover. Veterinarians treated burns, respiratory problems, dehydration, and injuries from debris and heat. Relocation efforts helped move animals away from high-risk fire zones to safer areas. Survival depended on careful monitoring and feeding programs tailored for each species rescued. Rehabilitation aimed to restore physical health, natural behavior, and long-term survival prospects. Collaboration with local communities helped locate animals in danger and support care initiatives. Rescue operations also documented species affected to guide future conservation and fire management. Volunteers provided food and enrichment to reduce stress and improve recovery outcomes. Post-rehabilitation, animals were released into unburnt areas to rejoin surviving populations. Efforts prioritized endangered and highly vulnerable species to prevent local extinctions. Scientific teams studied rescued animals to understand fire impacts on behavior and health. Monitoring after release ensured animals adapted successfully to post-inferno environments. Funding campaigns highlighted the need for ongoing support for wildlife rescue and recovery. 17. Fire in human communities. Local communities suffered alongside wildlife as the Amazon Inferno destroyed homes and farmland. Residents faced smoke inhalation, water contamination, and reduced access to food sources. Wildlife fleeing fire often entered populated areas, creating new challenges and conflicts. Communities assisted in rescuing trapped animals and mitigating fire risks wherever possible. Evacuation centers provided safety for humans while rescue teams focused on nearby wildlife. Farmers lost livestock and crops, adding economic hardship to the environmental crisis. Community participation was crucial for reporting fire locations and assisting in containment. Collaboration between locals, authorities, and volunteers improved fire response effectiveness. Education initiatives raised awareness of fire prevention and its effects on humans and animals. Survivors faced long-term recovery efforts, rebuilding homes, farms, and local infrastructure. Smoke and air quality issues affected human health as well as wildlife, compounding challenges. Local knowledge helped identify safe zones and support wildlife relocation after fire events. 18. Climate change connection. Experts identified climate change as a key factor worsening Amazon Inferno fires annually. Rising temperatures and prolonged droughts created conditions for more frequent and intense blazes. Drying of riverbeds, lakes, and wetlands increased fire susceptibility and wildlife vulnerability. Forest degradation reduced carbon absorption, further accelerating global climate change trends. Species already stressed by habitat loss faced additional pressures from increasingly severe fires. Researchers connected extreme weather patterns to higher incidence of uncontrollable forest fires. 19. Species extinction threat. Many species faced imminent extinction due to destruction of habitats in the Amazon Inferno. Rare and endangered mammals, birds, reptiles, and amphibians were particularly at risk. Loss of food, shelter, and breeding areas accelerated population decline across multiple species. Predators suffered from prey scarcity while prey species struggled to survive in charred environments. Insects, amphibians, and small mammals were often unable to escape, causing local extinctions. Fragmented habitats hindered repopulation and genetic diversity critical for survival of species. Rescue and rehabilitation efforts focused on preventing permanent loss of threatened wildlife. Conservation plans prioritized high-risk species to maintain ecological balance and biodiversity. Species extinction affected ecosystem functions, including pollination, predation, and nutrient cycling. Volunteers documented species disappearance to inform long-term recovery and protection strategies. Forest regeneration was necessary to restore habitats and provide future food and shelter for animals. Scientific monitoring tracked recovery of surviving populations and identified vulnerable species. Human intervention, habitat protection, and reintroduction programs helped prevent total extinction. 20. Lessons learned. The Amazon Inferno taught critical lessons about fire management and wildlife protection. Rapid response teams, monitoring systems, and community involvement proved essential in rescue. Habitat restoration, corridor rebuilding, and species rehabilitation were central to ecosystem recovery. Public awareness campaigns increased understanding of the impact of wildfires on biodiversity. Coordination between government, volunteers, and scientists improved rescue effectiveness. Climate change mitigation became a priority to prevent recurrence of severe forest fires. Long-term monitoring ensured species recovery and tracked ecological regeneration after fire. Conservation strategies integrated habitat preservation, reforestation, and sustainable land use. Wildlife rescue highlighted human responsibility in protecting endangered and vulnerable species. Recovery efforts focused on restoring food, water, and shelter to facilitate animal survival. Lessons emphasized that proactive measures could save countless animals from Inferno disasters. Volunteer networks proved invaluable in both immediate rescue and long-term rehabilitation efforts. Community engagement strengthened fire prevention, habitat protection, and wildlife conservation. Scientific research informed policies and practical interventions to reduce future fire damage. The Amazon Inferno left behind a scarred landscape and countless lives forever affected by fire. Wildlife conservationists continue their urgent work to rescue, rehabilitate, and protect remaining species. The tragedy highlighted the importance of global awareness and stronger environmental protection measures. Communities and organizations unite to rebuild habitats and prevent similar future disasters worldwide. Like this video and subscribe for more real stories showcasing resilience and the fight to save nature. Share your thoughts and support for wildlife and rainforest protection in the comments below today. Thanks for watching and helping us shed light on one of the most critical environmental crises ever.